You can also see some more remnants of its French roots. Maybe you can hear just how quiet and smoothly this M117 5-liter runs. And they took what probably could have been a very good running engine and destroyed it. Good. Hey everyone, and welcome back to DC Motor Works, where we've got our new sign up on the building. And today I've got a Survivor 500 SEC that is one of the nicest I have seen in a very long time. And today we're gonna check it out. So like I said, this is a 1985 500 SEC Mercedes, so the big body coupe from the 80s. This is the 126 chassis, and we never received this in the US officially. The 500s were a European model only, just like this one. This one actually came from France, which we'll show you some stickers and so forth here in a little bit. But in the US, we originally only got the 380 model, which was anemic to say the least. So a lot of these 500 models were imported as gray market cars, as you may have heard the term thrown around. But this particular car and the SEL variant of this model was actually what got the gray market ban or more restrictions on what cars could be imported into the US. But like I said, this is one of the nicest ones we've seen in a very long time. It actually sat stationary for, I think it was about 20 years. And you can see that it was kept very well in that time frame. I mean, it needs a nice polish and a few things, but overall, this is about how it looked other than some fresh tires. And it does present itself very well. You can see it was stored quite nicely. One of the big things about these 80s, especially the blue interiors, is that they wear very badly, unfortunately. And maybe we'll get a cut scene of one of our vehicles that has this blue interior and just show you how the comparison is after all these years. So here in the DC Motor Works graveyard, no, I'm just kidding. This is where we keep all of our projects and so forth. But this is our 80, I don't remember, 88 or so, 560 SEC. And this one has that blue interior as well that I was talking about. But let's go ahead and see just how different these two cars are. You can see, like I said, the blue interior does not wear exactly very well. You can see the center console there, or center armrest, I should say, is pretty beat. The wood trim is falling apart, unfortunately. Thankfully, the dash is mostly okay. It is a little discolored, but that's why we try to keep that one covered up. We did buy it just like this. Hopefully there'll be a video on this coming soon, but you can see we haven't really done anything with it in a long time. Like I said, it's great for this video. You can compare just what a tired one looks like compared to a really nice one. You can see the wood trim is, it almost starts to turn gray, and then it'll start to crack and fall apart. You can see it fading there. And one thing also to see is the cluster here. You can see how pale the gauges turn, but a deep yellow nonetheless. And this one does not have that, like I said. But this one's got a lot more miles on it and has had a tougher life. And like I said, this one looks great. I mean, you can see not super shiny, which is the way it should be from not having a bunch of oils and so forth from our skin. It just has a nice kind of a satin finish almost. You can see a little bit of color there coming off from the bolster, but nothing quite like what we have seen. And even just look at the steering wheel. You can see the molding line there. Hasn't been worn down from a bunch of hands turning for hundreds of thousands of miles, because this only has about 79,000 miles. You can see now that we have the door open here, this is the import information. So you can see it was imported 8/19 of 85 by Miss Rita Rorel de Luyquer. I don't know. Trying my French accent the best I can there, but has the identification number and everything. You can see that it was legitimately imported, and I'll point out some things that you did have to federalize the cars when you brought them into the US. They all got a different level of federalization, like our Euro 6.9s, which we'll tag that video up in here. They all got different levels of federalization. So one of them would be the US cluster here in miles per hour. Technically, you would have had to add braces in the doors and in the dash as well, which not a lot of cars did. And we'll go ahead and look under the hood. You can see this one is still sporting its small Euro bumpers and Euro headlights. So those did get to stay or were replaced later on in life. You can see also here, which we kind of currently have removed, this would be your charcoal canister, and you can see it has been welded on. Again, part of that same process, but this was for your fuel vapors coming from the fuel tank. They would get stored in a charcoal canister and then consumed in the engine. You can also see some more remnants of its French roots with these. Just see how nice and legible these stickers are still on the fan shroud there in French. We've also got a new hood pad installed on here, and you can just see kind of how nice and tidy everything is. Let's go ahead and fire this thing up and you can see how nicely it runs. So there you are. You can almost not hear it run. It runs super smooth. And with a nice solid 80s Mercedes door thud, our seatbelt presenter so lovely brings us our seatbelt. You can see this one was even equipped with what they called orthopedic or multi-contour seats. Very uncommon for those to work, but it is neat to see that it was optioned with them. We're gonna see if we can stay cool in here on this nice hot Georgia day, because the air conditioning does work very nicely. You can even see here on the gear shifter the same thing. You can still see the molding mark. It just shows you how low mileage and nicely cared for this car is. And while you're down here, same thing carries on with the wood trim. You can see there's no cracks. Everything still has a nice gloss. It's not faded. Again, we'll plug in from one of our vehicles that's a little more tired just to compare. One of the big things that amaze me on this one is these are just little stickers for the different switches. So this is your dome light, your sunroof, but usually these stickers will be worn almost completely off, and these look very nice. Same with the hazard switch. They'll turn almost white from the chalkiness and so forth, but this one has a nice deep red. And hopefully the camera can pick up also, which is very rare to see, is the texture on these buttons. So part of why this engine runs so good is because we had to go through it and replace it. And it's kind of a sad story about this one, is that it was improperly cared for when it was first reacquired from its slumber. And let's cut to the back room where the old engine is, and we'll show you what happened to it. So here we are at the original motor out of the 500 SEC. You can see it is in really nice shape, just like the one that's in it now. But unfortunately, and what's kind of common with these engines, is that if they've sat for a while, you really need to prime the oiling system to pump up the timing chain tensioner and so forth, or you can risk jumping the timing chain and smashing things, which is what happened to this one. The story we were told is that they just took straight ether or starting fluid to it, which is very flammable and combusts very well in an engine. So generally, if you start it on that, it will rev kind of in the higher range, you know, that you want for a startup, like 2,000, 3,000 RPM, which is way too high. And unfortunately, it kissed a few valves, especially here on cylinder 4 in the back, and pretty much destroyed this motor, unfortunately. We stuck a camera down in cylinder 4 there. I think I've got some pictures I might be able to throw up, but totally grenaded inside the cylinder there, unfortunately. So not sure what will be salvageable from this engine. I mean, of course, there's some things, but this kind of tells you what happens when someone does not properly know how to work on one of these. And they took what probably could have been a very good running engine and destroyed it. So kind of a sad story there. Like I said, we brought it back to life, and it is happy as can be now. Yeah. Those terminals. Maybe Paul can say something about oil.
So when you use oil from today's standards, they don't have the zinc additive, and what happens is it wipes the cams on these old engines, and so therefore it's a really good idea to have some sort of a zinc additive, or just anything that isn't synthetic. And a 3,000 mile service interval on these are a really good idea. But yeah, as far as engines go, this is a really nice looking engine. I always like to kick the oil off at least on the gasket surface so that the gasket itself can grab and won't slide off when you put it on. So it's always good practice to replace these little copper crush washers on the valve cover bolts here.
So a little side note here, while Paul and Andy are working in the background, we are going to be doing a transmission service on this vehicle. And I wanted to showcase this to you. This is a anti-starvation filter. This actually came out with the 5-liter motor, more so in the 107 SL. But they were noticing with the ferocious acceleration of the 5-liter V8 that you could starve the transmission of fluid from those high G-forces. So they created this filter. And if you see here, it's got this, we'll call it a valve on the bottom here. What it does, it sits like this in the car if you're facing that direction. And when those high G-forces are experienced, this valve will close and allow all the fluid at the rear to be pulled up into the filter. And same under braking, it will go forward and allow this to pull fluid from the front. Little bit of history there for you for how ferocious the Euro 5-liter M117 is. Right, Paul?
Yes, sir. You don't need a torque wrench for everything. Sometimes just a tiny little ratchet is all you need. Takes about 8 Newton meters on these. A little less, a little more is fine. It is a good idea to go out and warm up the engine, you know, do a drive cycle and come back and retorque the valve cover gaskets, just because this rubber that's been sitting on a shelf for God knows how long is going to move a little bit. So a lot of people might disagree, but I do not like actually tightening these up with more than just my fingers, because if you're stuck on the side of the road and you have to do anything, you don't need a tool to pull the air box, but you would if you over tighten them. So we're about to do a transmission service, and unfortunately there's this exhaust pipe that's in the way because it's a Euro spec car. So we're gonna have to drop the exhaust. All right, first blush, looking pretty good. Not too bad. No chunks. I mean, no magnet, so it's kind of hard to tell perfectly what's going on in here, but yeah, I've seen certainly a lot worse than that. And always inspect, just make sure there's no tears. Looks pretty good. I just like to inspect it, make sure it's got things that are supposed to stay behind. That way when you put it all together, you don't run into any issues. So obviously always line up your gear selector. So I like to snug these and then sit there and run all the rest of the bolts in, and don't tighten anything because it's always the last bolt that you have an issue with. All right, now that I got all the bolts in, I'll just snug them up. It's always good to work from the inside out. So it might sound like I'm going over it crazy, but it's going by tenths, so it's not that bad. So I'm just cleaning up the transmission pan now, obviously. Making sure the sealing surface is nice and clean. There's no mars or chips or rust spots or not wooged or flared or anything like that. Just so it's gonna mate nicely.
That in and of itself was a bit of a labor of love, because finding a proper high compression 5-liter Euro motor is not an easy feat, but we did do it. And like you heard, this one does run fabulous. Again, I wish I could translate over the camera just how smooth this thing runs. I mean, you just can't feel it, which is very nice. It is one of the smoothest running 117 engines that I have dealt with, because usually they're kind of rumbly a little bit. You get to feel them a little more. You can see it's still got its Becker Mexico original radio. With the neat thing of these old Mercedes models is that your fader was located here in the center console. So this is what would control your speaker output to front or rear, or of course just right back in the center. Works flawlessly. So back then you get one power mirror and one manual. And I've always thought kind of funny were these big airbag covers, but like I said, it's all in great shape, and it's just amazing to see one that is still this nice after all these many years. See, it does have its European headlight adjustment, so these were vac. You could change the level of your headlights, so 3 would actually be the lowest setting, and 0 would be the highest. Nice, gentle acceleration. I think these are rated at 225 horsepower, so it was a adequate amount. But like I said, way better than what we had in the US with the 380 model. And later for the US we got the 560 to help alleviate the lack of power that the Americans were complaining about. Drive straight, brake straight, even again for sitting for 20 years. Thankfully it does have a new set of tires on it, so we don't have to be too concerned about that. It had some very, very old Michelins on it, which actually still felt pretty round, which was a huge surprise. You can see here even the oil pressure. This is pretty much full hot oil pressure, and it's still around 2 bar, which is pretty amazing. Usually full hot, they're gonna hover around 1 bar in these 117 motors. But this one, you can see, is very healthy. Transmission shifts nice and solid. These should have a pretty firm shift, but not jolting, from the 4-speed automatic. And reverse does grab very quickly, which is a big plus, because the reverse clutches on the 722.3 do like to wear out kind of early. So that's always one thing you want to look out for on one of these, is if you put it in reverse and it takes 3-4 seconds, it's going to need a rebuild, at least on those clutches. You can kind of pick and choose what you rebuild. See, it's nice and quiet. We don't really have any excessive wind noise, any creaking from the interior. Get our nice suspension seats from 80s and earlier Mercedes. They're super comfortable even all these years later, and you just get to cruise. See, our blue dash is in fantastic condition. It did just barely start to have a crack here in the right by the speaker cover there, but nothing cracked within the driver's view. Like I said, these blue interiors did not tend to age very well, but this one looks fabulous. All right, we're gonna tone this down a little bit so that you can hear the engine. We're gonna run it through some gears here. So I'm gonna give it full kick down. Nice solid shift. We're cruising nicely, even though I'm starting to sweat, even with just the AC off for that short amount of time. So we'll kick that back on. I say we're cruising along. I'm not gonna say how fast, but we are cruising along quite nicely. Super comfortable. You can see it drives nice and straight. Even for one of these old gearboxes, you can see, even with small inputs, we get a reaction from the car, which some of these you'll get in and you'll be doing this and nothing's happening, but you can see this one moves quite nicely. You can hear the automatic climate control probably adjusting itself there. See, we get quick response from the transmission. Kick down and everything's working properly. So if you just give it some throttle, you get one gear, and then kick down, you get another gear. And then it goes back into fourth, so going through all the gears happily. It is nice to be in one that has some power. It is very similar to a 560. You may say it feels a little better than one of those. Kind of depends on which one you get in. So you can have a look there, and maybe you can hear just how quiet and smoothly this M117 5-liter runs. We also did some fresh belts. Like I said, we just did the valve cover gaskets and the hood pad. So you can hear there, runs nice and smooth. Our temperature is dead perfect, even on this 90-degree Georgia day. But we'll go ahead and take just one more walk around here, just to show you how pretty this car is. Of course, they look the best in their true European form, with the short bumpers and the European headlights. See, the body is nice and straight. Like I said, it could use a good polish, but it is going to the detailer here later today. Wanted to make sure that we were done mechanically before it heads that direction. You can see a neat little antenna there. And one other neat thing is that the kind of back in the 80s there, they had the full light bar. This tended to be added there. Got your warning triangle still. But the body is nice and straight all the way down. Well, we hope you all enjoyed looking at this 500 SEC today as much as we've enjoyed having it here and bringing it back to life. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next video.